See, we plan ahead. That way we don't do anything right now.
I think about lots of things. Now, why don't we not stand here talking about them and get down to doing them?
To begin.
Clytus, I'm bored.
To begin.
What plaything can you offer me today?
How to start.
When I was writing Four Finger Discount last December and January, I didn't have a detailed outline. I had many pages of notes. Let's see how many. 5,000 words of notes. And as far as an outline went, I had some bullet points. I think originally it was like 10 bullet points. And then as I wrote, I added a few more details to get the order right of things that had to happen. And so I ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 20 bullet points. 2 of which ended up getting removed or struck through because they weren't going to happen once the plot met up with the character of Bennington. The situation changed with how Bennington connected. And so a couple details with him went away. I don't do outlines, generally. I think with Guardia stuff or Basara stuff is where I've had the most outlining. The first Guardia-related novel I wrote, The Empress of Time, specifically followed a format because they have this thing called the Jebbafolg, the Mountains of Consequence, which is this sort of mythical story structure where if you're following... What is the name of that road? I don't remember the name of the road. Weird. It's the road that gets you to Faraway Castle. Because Faraway Castle, part of why it's called Faraway Castle, because originally I imagined Guardia as much simpler, almost childish fairy tale kind of thing, rather than a real detailed and sometimes gritty fantasy world. So most of the towns were at the western end of Guardia, and then there was Finity Field, and at the other end of Finity Field is huge. At the other end of Finity Field is Notop, which is the mountain above which Faraway Castle hovered at the time. It no longer hovers there. That is, in the current history of the things I'm writing, that is 100 years ago-ish, or 80 years ago, I forget the exact number. But that one, the Jebbafolg, is these 25 specific peaks along that road, where it's sort of supposed to be this meditative journey, and I don't think I connected it there, but on a rewrite, I want to connect it to Pero. It is a sort of semi-philosophical thing, or maybe not Pero, but, what is his name? Either Jebro. Jebro was this important follower of Pero. He's like the equivalent of Paul in terms of Christianity. And then there's also this other guy called Marrow the Wake. His nickname is the Wake because he was a very militant follower of Pero. These are the two people responsible for Pero as a religion. Peroism. Peroism? Is that what I call it? I don't use it as a noun very much. But one of them is sort of like this philosophical thing, kind of like the Buddha was, what do they call it? The Four Visions or whatever it is. Where you saw the old person, the young person, the dead person, or I forget now. It's only 4 things and I can't remember all 4. Yay. It's okay, I'm not a Buddhist. But kind of like that. And so each mountain has this sort of idea. And so I framed the story as 25 chapters. And so it had to be very specific things of, here's the beat this chapter hits, here's the beat this chapter hits, here's the beat this chapter hits. And structurally that meant chapter 1 was much longer than any of the others because it had to get Mary from World War II London to Guardia. It had to get her from where she originally shows up in Guardia to the city of Eadith, which is where the Jebbafolg began under the old map. Now the Eadith would actually be on the way, not before. But also I don't know that she's going to do much in Eadith. How would that work? Thing to figure out later, whenever I get around to rewriting that. And the last chapter is a bit longer just because a lot more happens once they're at Notop and go up to Faraway Castle. And Lion Horse Tree had a structure. The title itself is the overall structure. We are following 2 journeys. One is Marowell and one is Tonomo. And they are traveling toward each other, but they don't know it. And their stories are going to kind of weave together in the end. But specifically, they are going to each meet a lion. That is a dragon. They're each going to ride on a horse, except it's actually a Belroth, not a horse. But Belroth look like a horse. So the whole trick to the title is none of the things in the title are exactly what we would expect. The lion is a dragon, the horse is a Belroth. The tree is specifically the same tree because then they're in the same place, and it is the Maker's Row, which is this mythical tree, which is where literally the world was born out of its roots. And, well, I won't spoil the ending for that one. There was more to it than that. It was just not just those 3 points, but it was also a point before the lion chapter section, a point in between lion and horse, and a point in between horse and tree. And so it was these 5 large beats that collected their story together. And then I think it ended up cutting back and forth a little bit more between the two of them, so it was more chapters than just 5, or 10, I guess. 5 of each. Song Fell Far Away, though I only wrote a little bit of it. I wrote the prologue and chapter 1. And chapter 2? I think it was chapter 2. But it had a specific structure that got kind of messed up as I was starting to write it, and I want to go back to the original, because the original was going to be... I will spoil this. This isn't a spoiler to the plot. This is a spoiler to the structure. It's something I really like. Going back to... because these 3 books were supposed to go together. The 3 books, The Empress of Time, Lion, Horse, Tree, and Song of Fell Far Away, are supposed to go together as a trilogy. So in terms of the way time works... we start with Mary in World War II. She goes to Guardia. She ends up meeting... wait, how does that connect backward? She ends up being responsible for overthrowing the king. The king's daughter, one of the king's daughters, Flea, a infant, is a major part of the beginning of Lion, Horse, Tree, when she is sort of inadvertently abducted / rescued. And Tonomo's part of the story is him trying to return the infant. And in the end, he and Merrywell have to get the infant out of Guardia in order to protect her. That leads into, and this is where it gets confusing, 1880s London. Or maybe 1870s, I guess, timing-wise. Which would get us to the end of Lion, Horse, Tree. And we are setting up a connection to the Jack the Ripper murders. Yeah. And so in Song of Fell Far Away, we're going to have this psychiatrist, I forget his name, but he was specifically going to be working at Bethlehem, well, I forget the full name of the hospital. It's near London, or in London. And around the time of the Jack the Ripper murders. So it connects back into Merrywell and Flea, now with new names, living in London. This psychiatrist has noticed that he has several patients who think they are people from Basara. And then he makes an effort to go collect their stories and interview them about these things. And then he finds that there's reports of patients at different hospitals that say these things. So he travels around collecting all of these. And then Song of Fell Far Away is going to have footnotes from him explaining this. But is going to be chapter by chapter, was supposed to be each chapter is a different person. There might be some repeats, but a different person talking about being someone else in Basara, and he is piecing together the story of what turns out to be 2 things. The Iridian campaign, which is when Guardia took control of Iridia, which is the kingdom to the west. A story more in the past in Guardia, and then a story more in the present in Guardia that involved the Guardia Symbol War, and specifically this one sort of platoon of soldiers who have to protect these children who were being trained in magic and inadvertently got caught up in the middle of a battle. So they have to get them away from the war zone. These 2 plots end up connecting in Guardia over many years apart. End up connecting because of magic stuff, very specifically in their ends. And they end up being responsible for... We would also find out that Flea is going to have a child who ends up growing up to be Mary, the main character from the first book, Mary's mother. And so it circles back into that story. And the Jack the Ripper murders are connected to the stuff going on in Guardia, and they're trying to stop her from coming to overthrow the king because of complicated plots. It was a little convoluted, but that was the point. Now, I also want to tie Song of Faraway into a rewrite of a novel I did write, the first novel I ever finished, which was not a fantasy novel. It was more of a horror supernatural thing, which is called The Man with the Holes in His Hands, which is about a minister in a small town in California who... Does he abduct? I forget which people get abducted and which people end up there on purpose, but his followers, he has what, in the terms of the thing, I think they called a cult within the church. Basically, he's running a Christian church in this little town, but he's also running this cult inside that church. And it was sort of weird because that novel came about when I was like watching some old movie, I don't remember what. Actually, I think I was watching House 2, which I just talked about in the last episode, right? Coincidence. Because at the end of that, they're going to sacrifice this, they're in this temple that's like Aztec or Mayan, I forget what they're going for in that, for their aesthetics. But they're going to sacrifice this woman, and I was thinking about how many stories or how there's this stereotype of sacrificing the virgin to this god, and what if we took that seriously? And part of the story of Man with the Holes in His Hands was that Malachi wants to sacrifice this girl his people have abducted as... I don't even remember why exactly. He's just doing it. This was in 1996 that I wrote this book, so it's been a while. But now I would connect it to Malachi has found a copy of Song of Faraway and has reason to believe it is absolutely true. He might even be I was going to say he might be a descendant of Mary, but he couldn't be because Mary ended up in Guardia. Actually, she would have ended up in Gual, but same difference. She's on Basara, not Earth. But then it's about Malachi creating this cult because he no longer trusts Christianity or our world's religion because he doesn't see evidence, whereas he can see specific evidence, and that's part of the story, that there are gods in this other world, and there's a way to get to this other world. And so Man with the Holes in His Hands is about him giving up on his religion here, his earthly religion, and adopting a Basaric religion, and ending up in Basara, still going to be a religious leader. We would have already met him. He is mentioned in Four Finger Discount. He's going to be mentioned in Chase Two Rabbits, because he is going to be the leader of the Church of Pero, essentially the equivalent of the Pope, with a lot going on regarding him. He's important for the larger story, potentially, if I can keep writing these things. So it all loops together, and there's structure. What I wanted to do, this was Saturday. I'm recording this on Monday, so day before yesterday, I was going to work, and I was going to take my notes for Chase Two Rabbits, put them into this program, I think it's called Miro, which is like this little corkboard thing where you can move Post-its around digitally, and I can also open it on my phone and on my iPad, as well as on the desktop, and kind of sort out these notes and figure out all of these different things I need to happen in the story, what order they happen, how do they connect, what beats are missing. Because Chase Two Rabbits is essentially a mystery/investigation plot, it needs a lot of it decided up front. It needs a more detailed outline than probably I have ever done. But here's what happens when I go to do that. I'm just copying my notes from my phone into my notes file on the computer first. That's sorted into, let's see, what are the sections here? Chase Two Rabbits notes. First section is just Lee. So, sections about the character. What he is, the puppet brought to life, who brought him to life, important names, people in his life, things he does, like he smokes a lot, he has a lot of scars, a lot of repaired parts, he has a pet, he basically has the equivalent of a car, except he doesn't use it much. It was a gift from a rich client. He's got a favorite restaurant, he loves bookstores. So, because of the bookstore thing, the next section is books. And that has a section on his favorite bookstore, a new bookstore he's just discovered, some books he's got, and then tying into the end of Four Finger Discount, because Chase Two Rabbits starts essentially right after Four Finger Discount ends. he has ended up with a collection of books that I don't know how much he'll know about this, but as far as I'm concerned, I know this, so that's what's important, is he gets the books that were left behind in Kill's apartment. Because Kill only took 2 of his books with him. And then I made bullet points here of books that he would end up with, and how interesting they are or not. Like, there's this author called Stone Swallow, which is I see as the equivalent of, like, Shakespeare. Someone everyone's vaguely familiar with, but maybe hasn't read. And Kill had a collection of everything by Stone Swallow. They're not worth much. The next section, Ma Nettles. Ma Nettles is the sort of boarding house / restaurant that Lee lives above and operates out of as a detective. So this section has, here's all the people who live there, and how they relate to one another, and how they might connect to the plot. Like, one of the people who lives there is an actress. A couple of her friends are going to figure as informative sources for Lee in the plot. Then we have the case. So, keep in mind these are half sheets, but they are single-spaced. Page 9, we get to the case, which is the plot itself. This isn't all in order. It's a lot of stuff. I know what the opening scene was going to be. I knew that we are going to start after he's already taken the case, and we have to go backward. Then there's the supporting cast section and a miscellaneous section, which has some quotes and extra plot beats that I have to connect with the other supporting cast and everything else. Then there was a section for Eadith, which I'll get to in a moment. Meaning the city of Eadith. Knowing where some things are, some places, names of businesses, things like that. Case is, where's his name? Antogen Hasakonik? Or Togi, as he wants to be called. Togi Hasakonik. He is this rich guy who used to work as one of the Blood Cloaks, meaning he was under the king. Because a lot of rich people become worried about their families after the whole end of Four Finger Discount, something that happens there. That, plus an incident that damaged... I've talked about the fingers, right? The whole setup for Four Finger Discount is rich people deliberately cut a finger off and keep it in storage so that if anything happens to them, they can be resurrected using magic. Very expensive magic. Togi's storage, where he has the fingers of he's... Why doesn't he have a finger for his wife? Maybe she took it with her. She left him and then died. Interesting. He has 2 daughters, adult daughters. Their fingers were ruined in something. I don't know the incident yet. Because he doesn't know where his daughters are currently. He hires Lee to find them and make sure they're okay. And if possible, get a piece of them to put in storage so he can replace the fingers, essentially. Going to find these 2 daughters is the setup for most of the plot, but the clear trigger is actually after this, so we get a little flashback to him being hired, because at the beginning of the story, Lee has just been out one night. He and his muscle were essentially torturing a guy for information. And then he gets a call that he needs to come to a scene of a murder. And the murder is Togi Hasakonik. So, Togi's dead, probably because something Lee was looking into related to the case. And we continue from there. That case ends up tying in because one daughter, Beatricinia Beatty, is tied to a ring of pornographers and human traffickers, basically. Well, people traffickers. How she's tied to them, vague so far. Then you have Frankie. The other daughter has joined a group called the Denial, which are trying to get rid of magic, and is currently tied into a fight between the Denial and the Knot, which is a group of magic users primarily out of Aridia. And Hasakonik is an Aridian name, so she has ties back to there. And so the plot involves how these 2 things connect to one another, or don't, and how they lead to a larger conspiracy involving, among others, Malachi Ravid. Leader of the church, or about to be the leader of the Church of Perro, and a bit part from Four Finger Discount, main character of Man with the Holes in His Hands. This is how my brain does this. All these things keep doing notes on different stuff until one of them suddenly jumps ahead. And yesterday, I'm going to sort these notes. I realize I'm missing some details on Eadith. So I have open, in no particular order, 3 images from my old map of Eadith, 5, 10, 11, because I was looking at some specific label details. This is from when I was using the city of Eadith in a D&D campaign in the past. I also opened a Word file for Absalom locations, because some locations I used in that D&D city were taken from the Pathfinder city of Absalom. And I was looking at the Absalom locations file because I want to make sure I don't keep any of the locations I took from there, or at least don't keep the names, I had 2 different maps open of things from the world, Eleuthea, my working map 3, and Malastra, my working map 3. I wanted to sort out details about Eadith all in one place. So, also in creating a new file, Eadith Notes, I had to open the Gods of Basara, the Daggers of Crosswater Notes, the story Out of the Lion's Den and Into the Fire, the Glossary of Guardia, which is old from when I was writing Guardia stuff 20 years ago, Basara Notes, which is a current thing, Sawasi Old Words, which is a regularly updated thing with new stuff, a new image map I did for Eadith, Eadith Districts, which shows how it's a 9-district city with 3 exterior districts outside what used to be walls. But the walls are gone. That was part of an event that happened in my D&D campaign, and now I've retconned into this world. 4-finger discount, because I had to adjust some stuff there. Essentially, I was changing the names of things. I used to call them barons, and I didn't like that anymore, so now they're called rectors. And so an overbaron is an overrector. Mid-baron used to be low baron, now they're underbarons. And then there's outer barons, which are somewhere above like an ambassador, because they are governors of a colony kind of thing, or not governors, but representatives of. And then I had Chase 2 Rabbit Notes open, obviously. 4-finger discount notes file, in addition to the novel itself. That's just on the computer. Then I also had to dig out my D&D campaign stuff from the campaign that ended several years ago now, to find my handwritten notes about the government of Eadith. Because I wanted to just steal some of those names, even though technically those people were supposed to be in those offices 100 years ago or whatever. Most of them never got mentioned by name, so it doesn't matter. In that campaign, everyone had a name though, because just in case, there was a situation where there were these beings following the party and keeping track of everyone they killed or affected, to then name those names back later. And it was a whole dramatic thing the first time they heard the names, and the players had to realize, wait, I recognize some of these, and realize, oh, this is all the people I've killed. Every character had a name, including everyone in the main offices of the government of Eadith. Now I took some of those names, transferred them over. I had new ones because, like, Odd's aunt was a underbaron, now under rector. Or no, she's a mid-rector. And so I had to change the title and make a list of, here are all the districts of Eadith. Here is who is the over-rector and mid-rector. Is that right? I might have to change it again. I think the titles might not make sense. We had High Rector, which is the king. No, the Over-Rector is the king. Then we have High Rector and Under-Rector. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. It should be Over-Rector, Under-Rector. He should be the High Rector. And then Mid-Rector are these things elsewhere. And then Outer Rectors are the colonial stuff. And then there are ambassadors. I didn't name everyone. I left some gaps. But, I mean, for the most part, these people might not get named in any story ever, but just in case. A few of them got mentioned in 4-finger discount, so I had to come up with names on the spot. Azalar Falconhand was a name I stole from my old D&D thing, and he and his son, Azlaresh, were an important point in the early chapters of 4-finger discount, but not major characters. And, yeah, I need to switch these. So it's over, under, and then high for the king, and then, so I'll have to switch them all around again, all over again. But the other stuff in this file that's figuring out the rectory, which is the government. I already had notes for the money, but I put it into here. That their money consists of pennies, also called wheels or gears, then dragons/lions, then crowns/kings, then tev/rose/bar, and generally instead of like dollars or yen or pounds, their things are called snaps, which is a bastardization of the Sawasi word, persane. I could call it purses, actually. Percy's, purse, but I don't know. Might change it from snap. Snap sounds a little cute. But then I had, for the districts, I had a little description of them. If they're in notable locations, like Dragon's Perch, if you go to Dragon's Perch, is the dominant thing is the skyport. The ministries, the academies. So basically, making that word file took me a few hours because I was adjusting stuff in all the other files at the same time and double checking notes. Never actually got around to sorting the stuff for Chase 2 Rabbits. So I still got to do that part. But then the last thing I'll say for today is just yesterday I found, I'll just read you the sentence. The phrasing may change once I get to the writing, obviously. This is good. Because once I have, I already knew what the opening scene was. I already knew kind of where the story begins. And now I think I have the opening sentence. I'm waiting for the short rail, and an old human lady with blue hair told me it should be tells. I think he's going to go present tense. Ish. Old human lady with blue hair tells me I was bleeding. Or tells me I'm bleeding. I tell her it isn't my blood. She's horrified. And that's when my buzzer buzzed. I had another job already. Some phrasing like that. Buzzer is this little thing he's got. They do have the equivalent of phones, but not cell phones. And he has a little thing that buzzes. Magical thing that buzzes on his outfit so he knows that his office has gotten a call. So he knows there's a case. He's waiting for the short rail. It's basically a trolley that goes along the major boulevards of the city. Old human lady. Be specific, calls her that he refers to her as human is a good line or good detail because it means he's not, and also there's reason to mention it. That she has blue hair is just fun. He's bleeding, but he's not. It's because he's got blood from me because he was just at a scene where he and his muscle Jouncer were beating a guy up, etc. And so now I kind of get an idea of a tone and how he talks already a little bit. I want to be a little more. He's supposed to sound like a detective novel, detective film, kind of first-person narration, telling you about all their stuff. Ish. So I think Chase 2 Rabbits might happen soon, but I still got 2 days worth of class left when I'm recording this. And then I gotta still sort the notes to get my bullet points for the whole plot. See how it all ties together.
Cut! Perfect.
I should get coffee. Coffee would help me think. But I should write something first, then reward myself with coffee. Coffee and a muffin.
You're still here?
Okay, so I need to establish the themes.
It's over. Go home.
Maybe banana nut. That's a good muffin.
Go.